Hey, welcome to Mike's Trains, and thanks for joining me for another video. In this video here, I said I wasn't going to talk about doing the feeders, the feeder wires to power all the tracks here. But I've got so many going on that I have to do. I think I'm looking at, I don't know, 40 sets, 50 sets, something like that. I think it's around 40 sets of these feeder wires right here. And in talking to some of the people that I've come across in the last few days, I thought it might be useful. And going back to my website, I had said that there was a video about how I do this, and I couldn't really find anything worth saying that I've actually showed how I do the feeder wires. So I thought I would take the opportunity now while I've got it going to show you how I do all this. So as you can see, I have feeders all throughout the layout. I have some down here, and let's see if I can get you in here. I have more down here. I have a whole row, one to each track, and then you come back this way and they're all throughout the whole thing. Now what I do, and it's probably overkill, but it's just the way I do things, and I tend to overdo rather than underdo so that I know things are going to be good. But what I like to do is I like to put a set of feeders here onto each piece of track that I put down, so that I know that there's power going in this track the same as there is in this piece of track, you know, throughout the whole layout. So every piece of track I do has a set of feeders on it. You probably don't have to do that, but I like to do that, and the reason being is that I don't like to have my tracks relying solely on rail joiners like this to have to get their connection from, and the rail joiners going between the pieces of track. I think relying on this little piece of metal here is just not the way to go, and not to have to think that you're not going to have trouble with electrical in any way. So not saying that you will have trouble, but for myself, this is the way I do it. Okay, and I don't have trouble with electrical. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about these feeders. Now you can see the wire there, and what I do for this one, I'm doing it different than I've done in the past. What I have is I bought 20 gauge bell wire, which is this right here. It's a thin wire, and all I do with that is I have a wire stripper, and I take the wire stripper and I strip off an end, okay, right up on the top here, and then I take I have needle nose pliers, and I take that straight end. Now this end is stripped off a lot more than it should be if it was going to be the top end up here. And then I just take the end and I take it like this, squeeze it down, and bend it over. So I end up with this hook that you see right on the end here. Okay. Now there are other ways you can do it. There are several other ways you can do feeders. Now I've also seen, and I used to have some and I couldn't find any for this video, but these rail joiners here, I've also seen feeders soldered to the bottom of the rail joiner like this, and then you join the tracks, and the feeders go down through the layout in the same way, and in that way you don't have wires sticking out, you know, showing on the sides of your rails at all. And I've also seen other people cut out ties in here and then solder the same way as to the rail joiner. They solder it right to the rail and then drill the holes and then put the feeders down through and set the track down in. Now I would have done it that way, but for this many feeders and this much track, I really don't want to take the time to do that, and I don't think it's worth my trouble. So I did it like this, and what I did was I went in after I cut all my feeders, and usually what I'll do is I'll sit down and watch TV while I'm doing this. I'll cut them all ahead of time, so I have a handful of red and white, and I use red and white on my layout. So all my track wiring is just red and white. That's everything that goes to the DCC setup. So I don't get confused with lighting wiring and other accessories that go down in the track. So the way I have it set up is when I'm looking at my rails down here, okay, the red is the furthest away from me. So red is on the back, white is down the front, all right? And as you can see, this is one of my solder joints right here. This is one of my sets of feeders going into this track here. Doesn't look that bad, and that's actually a huge solder joint, so I've gotten better since I put all this down. So what I did was I followed through on all of my wiring. All my feeders are set so that the white is in the back, the red is in the back, the white is in the front. And I follow that theme throughout the whole layout. No matter where you look, that's what you get. Now, over here, when you're looking down at this part of it, let's get some focus here. Okay, so we're coming into a turnout. So we follow from here. Red is in the back, white's in the front. And you just follow this outside rail, and then we got red and white. And then we go down in the back over here to this other set of feeders, which is going off into another side of the layout. And we have, now it's on the side because the track's going straight in. Red's on this side, white's on this side, but it follows the same as what's back in the previous area. And then you'll follow down throughout the whole layout. Red's on the back, white's on the front. And it goes down the whole way as such. Now I've also taken and I put feeders in between the turnout here on the crossover. I have a set of feeders in this piece of track. These are all new tracks here. This is a new section of track that I put in here. So that gets a set of feeders. And then back here, I can't remember where the feeders were, and I've cut track and added in over here. So I couldn't remember if I put feeders, if I had feeders in here originally or not. So I didn't want to take a chance on that. I pulled them out and now I don't have them. So I'm putting another set of feeders right here. And these will go all the way back through the turntable and into the roundhouse all the same way. Now, the other way you can do this, as I said, you had feeders, I've seen them where you can buy them from Atlas with the feeder wires soldered to the bottom of the rail joiners. I've also done them this way. Now this is a piece of 14 gauge wire. Now obviously you're going to say that's real heavy to put on here, but it can be done. What I do is I'll strip off a little bit like this. Actually we'll cut off a little bit more. Alright, so now we have a bare wire. Alright, and then what I'll do is I'll separate out a lot of this wire. Maybe 2/3 of it. And we'll pull that out, and then I'll twist all of this together. So now that's a nice thin wire. Okay, and then I'll take my cutters and just clip off this extra hanging part like that. So now we have 14 gauge wire running up to, and then this small section of wire, and then I'll tin this. I'll have this totally covered, the stranded wire here with solder, and then that'll go down through the hole. And then once that's tinned, we'll take the pliers again, bend this over like this, and then we have the same thing going on here as there. And that's how I did the majority. Almost all my feeders on this layout are done this way, and it works fine. And you know, honestly, I think it holds power a little bit better than using the small gauge wire. I can do longer leads, longer feeders with this than I can with these. These you want to keep them as short as possible to keep the the power consistent throughout. With this one here, you can take longer leads and go further out away, you know, away from the track, and still get a good constant feed of wire and power coming up to the track. But for this train layout here, this train station, I don't want to use the big wire. Not to mention I'm out of it, and I needed to buy more wire, and I just figured, well, I'll just get the bell wire, and we'll use that. So that's going to be the deal. Now, to solder this stuff in, I'm just going to pull these back, and I'm going to take a little bit of alcohol, because I want to make sure that the rails are clean. So I have a brand new bottle, I have to open it. So what I have is rubbing alcohol here. It's just 70%, and I'm going to take a micro brush, dip it in there, and I'm just going to clean right here. I'm going to clean the web rail. Now this you probably should do. Just gets all the stuff off of there so your solder will stick really well. Now as you can see, my brush here got kind of dirty from doing that, so I know there's dirt in there. Okay, so now I want to take my soldering iron. Let's get rid of this alcohol. I'm just going to do one set of feeders, and then I'm just going to do the rest. But I just wanted to show you how I get this done. And take solder, and I'm going to tin the end of this wire right here, like that. I'm going to get a good coat of solder on there, like that. And then I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to put a little touch of solder in the rail, in the web of the rail, like that. Okay. Now we're going to take this and push this down in here, like that. Pull it right back so it's nice and lined up. Now I may need to get my cutters and my needle nose in here. Push this back. I want that nice and tight in there. Like that. Okay. And then we're just going to heat that together. Like this. I'm going to take a little touch of solder. Like that. And that's all it takes. And then that feeder is on. And then I'll go through the rest of them and do the same with all of them. So this is what we end up with. It's still kind of a little bit of a joint, but once I paint my rails, that kind of disappears. And it's a good solid joint. And then I'll go underneath. Now I cut all my feeders here like this. All of these, I make them all 6 inches long. You don't want to go longer than that. You want to keep them as short as possible. You know, 2 inches, 3 inches is more like it, but I cut them at 6, just so I'm sure to be able to reach my bus lines underneath. Okay, so what I'm going to do, once these feeders, they're all down and everything is soldered on top, I'm going to go underneath. Now these ends are stripped for a reason. Normally it's the suitcase connectors, but I'm not using them this time because I don't have any and I don't want to go buy any. What I'm going to do is I have this 14 gauge as my bus line right here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to take my strippers in a continuous line, and I'm going to take these in the middle and do one of these. And then I'm going to take this this wire right here, I'm going to wrap this around like this, and then I'm going to drop a little solder in there, and that'll go just like that. And those will be soldered in, and that's a perfect good connection. And then I'll wrap those in tape afterwards. And And that's how I'm going to do all of these feeder wires throughout the whole layout. So that's how that's going to go. If I've missed anything, you know, don't be afraid to say so. I think I covered everything. So like I said, make sure that these aren't too long. If you're going to use the smaller gauge wire, don't make these. You want to make these as short as you possibly can. You can use the heavier wire. If you thin out the, you make sure it's only stranded wire. You can't do this with solid wire. You can't make the ends of your feeders like this. Obviously you can't use solid wire for this. It has to be stranded so that you can thin it down. You can obviously solder underneath these rails. It's a little more work, but the end result is you don't end up with these types of solder joints. But you know, for all that I've got going on here, you can see down here, let's see if I can find one right over here. This is one of my previous solder joints. This would be one of my solder joints right here. This one right here. Not such a bad deal. It's painted. I painted all the rails and everything, and then you clean off the top. Once it's all painted, they kind of disappear into the track work. They don't really show at all. So doing them on the outsides and the web of the rail is not such a bad deal. I think it works out okay. And so I think that's all I'm gonna do in this video, because I got a lot of soldering ahead of me to do, and I want to get this done relatively quick so I can start working on scenery. I want to get trains running across here so that I can make sure that everything's working. But that'll be for next video. Maybe next video, if I can get all this working, I'll run some trains across it just to show you. So that's going to be it for this video. As always, thanks for watching and happy modeling.